The thing that stood out the most to me in South Africa was the children.
I never felt as black as I did in South Africa.
Cape Town was kind of a mask.
As we were traveling, and all of a sudden we turned to the other side of the mountain, and there was just this sea of aluminum in this area that just needed help.
So one morning I bought a train ticket to a random destination. I end up in a township called Philippi, and I started hearing music, and I was like, wow, this sounds like a very happy place. It didn't take long for me to step out into the streets of Philippi and feel a little bit weird. People were looking at me. I was the only white people on the streets, and I definitely felt like I didn't fit in initially. Needless to say, within 10 minutes I got mugged. And for the longest time, I couldn't really believe what had happened. I was angry at myself that I had ended up in a situation like that, that I had been naive and hadn't been with someone and hadn't done my due diligence in researching maybe the place as much as I should have. But once that happened, I started to think about what I was dealing with. I was a white tourist in a place where people don't have much. People struggle every day to feed their families, to send their kids to school, and I'm a tourist. The rand in my pocket meant almost nothing to me, whereas it could feed a family for a couple days. So I stayed in the township. I started really appreciating what the township had to offer. Once we came together that night around the table at the tavern with people similar to the ones that had taken my money in the first place, we became friends, and it was a really powerful episode for me to see that despite all the differences, friendship and connections can exist, and if you give people a chance, then they'll be willing to reciprocate, and cool connections can end up coming out of it.
We had this very strange experience where we had all these toothbrushes on the ship, and we didn't know what to do with them. They were just sitting in a closet taking up space, and Elizabeth Coder said, well, why don't you just take them and see if they can use them at this place, at Filani? And when we showed up, Ingrid, who was in charge of it, said, you can't imagine how badly we need toothbrushes. We're doing a dental clinic, and we had nothing to give the mothers and their children. So now they have 2,000 toothbrushes. That, to me, is an example of when you're trying to do good, good things happen that are unexpected.
South Africa is my home. The continent of Africa is my home. I was born there. The past 5 generations of my family were born there. And I don't think we would truly feel at home anywhere else. Also, I feel like identifying as an African or identifying as anybody from any continent goes so much further than the pigment of your skin or just how far back your family goes, but it's more about the history that you share, the struggles you've shared with the people around you, whether or not you're always on the same team, and whether or not you are willing to take responsibility for what has happened in the past of your country and to take responsibility for building the future.
I expected to walk through the ports and see more people like me, but the first thing I saw was the V&A waterfront. And in a country where more than 90% are black, that was the least race that I saw. And I mean, I'm not racist or anything, but it was a little confusing. And it wasn't until I saw the townships and compared them to the V&A waterfront that I actually got a true idea of what South Africa was. And my original idea of South Africa kind of shocked me compared to what I actually saw in the end.
When I was a little girl, I ran up to my parents and I asked, are Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu pink or purple? And they all burst out laughing, and they didn't understand why I would ask such a question. And when they finally calmed down and tried to understand why I was asking that, I said, well, everybody keeps talking about how wonderful these colored men are, and I just want to know what color they are.
I had one incident where I was talking to our taxi driver, as we drove through Stellenbosch. And I remember him talking about how if I were to go into one of these wineries by myself, they'd likely turn me away. But if one of my white friends were to go in, they'd let them in and tell them that they were available to do wine tastings.
We still have racism in South Africa. I would love to say we don't. And sometimes I try to convince myself that we don't. But I think you drive through Cape Town and you see rich, wealthy areas with predominantly white families, and then you drive through the townships and you see predominantly black families. And we know that there's segregation, and it's not law anymore the way it was during apartheid. It's now a matter of circumstance, but that still doesn't make it okay.
We shall stand in the surface of Sophia, in South Africa, our land.
When I think South Africa, I think of diverse people who come together to build a bright future. And when I think South Africa, I think of women and children who have marched and died for this country. And I think of our flag waving triumphantly in adversity, and I think of lying under the stars with my friends and just philosophizing about the future. I think of hope, and I think that this is a place where I want to spend my future.